Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and that's right, I'm back with a little more 1985 Under an Iron Sky. I know many of you guys have been looking forward to seeing the next one in the series. Sorry, it's taken me a little while. It's Christmas time frame, holidays. I am just swamped right now. And I gotta admit, this one's got me a little not scared, but just anxious, because I so want to do justice by this game. I so want to do it to the best of my ability. I know a lot of you guys are talking to me in the comments and sending messages about questions you have and all that stuff, and I want to answer those as best I can. And for some reason, this one just has me worried that I'm going to do wrong or not do right by it. So that's why I've been taking it so slow and so easy and just trying to do the best I can with it. Just keep in mind, I'm not an expert at the game. I'm going over the rule book, constantly reminding myself of things. My memory isn't perfect. Landmines and brain damage don't do well for remembering things, so I am doing my best here, but I might make a little goof here and there. And speaking of which, we're going to address one. I figured out the lighting was better this way last time. When we did our air combat in the previous video, I did make a goof when it came to the modifiers, and I was using the modifiers across the top here, and they're actually going to be used up or down, right? So those changes that I was making into it, but I think it was the air superiority, the numeric superiority that was changing it, that would actually affect the up or down, right? So instead of it changing this column that we were rolling on, it would instead change the results you would get. So you would figure out what column based on your evasion rating, and then these modifiers down here are going to affect when you're rolling on it instead, and not the column that you're rolling on specifically. So that was my little goof. We're not going to go back and retcon it at this point, but that would have changed it, because they wouldn't have been rolling on such a good column and such a bad column respectively. But considering the NATO forces ended up getting horribly lucky, and I forgot to roll for the return attack on that, but I did annotate that one on there. So we're going to jump in there, and like I said, I'm going to annotate anything that I notice that I forget along the way. Now, we did the air superiority phase in the previous one. And like I said, I'm going to do this slow. We're going to Callendale it, which you guys seem to find funny, and just slow by the rules as much as I can. Remember, we're not touching on optional rules, though. We're hitting the core gameplay, which means nuclear strike phase. We're not worried about. I don't think there's any nukes in this scenario that I'm playing anyway. So that means we're actually down to the meat of the game, the Warsaw Pact action phase. So we'll have their action phase, and then the NATO action phase comes right after it. Now, since we're in the first turn, we don't have any reinforcements to worry about, no replacements, nobody's busted up yet, so we're not going to be able to touch on those just yet, but we'll touch on those more specifically in a later video. But looking next, there's the Special Forces Assault Phase. Now, this is an optional rule, but I did want to just kind of gloss over it real quick for everyone. And special forces in this game are abstracted out a little bit, because they're obviously not the unit scale that these units are here. These are much larger units that we're focusing on. So they are represented. They do have counters in the game. They look like a NATO X, kind of like your infantry symbol with like an arrow on it. I think I put some of those out, but I might not have, since I was not doing the optional rules. But you will use those during that phase to do things like strikes on airports and strikes on air defense assets or specific units or flak units or things like that. And they have to start in a hex with their helicopter transport. So you'd have like a little transport helicopter here. Then you'll count out, because when we're going to do helicopters later on in a separate video, but the basic gist is they do have a range, that large number right there at the front. So this one's 36. And what that means is it's not that they can go out 36 hexes. They can go out half that. So what is that? 18 hexes. They could go out 18 hexes, and then they have to be able to fly back. That's what I mentioned previously about the gamey tactic that they talk about in the rule book. Yes, technically you can have a helicopter do a suicide mission, because effectively they die if they go beyond their max range and can't get back to a valid heliport when they're coming back. So yes, you can do it, but it's considered a gamey tactic. I think that would be up to you if you're doing it solitaire, or you and your buddy if you're playing together, on whether or not you're kind of allow stuff like that. Like if it's a last ditch mission that you're trying to hold back in advance, and you send the helicopters on a suicide mission because you're trying to save your retreating forces, something like that. Yeah, okay, it sounds acceptable. But if you're just doing it to game the system, you probably want to try to avoid that. I mean, you know yourself, you know the type of people you play with, on which way you should go with it. But the short version is helicopter and the special forces have to start in the same hex, and they'll fly out and they'll do whatever mission it is. If it's attacking a airport or helipad or air defense units, like our SAMs up here, whatever they're doing. And you'll have the instance where if you're flying through flak or air superiority areas, all that good stuff, that has to be accounted for, and your helicopter has to survive as it's going out, conduct its mission, and then survive coming back. And then there's casualties that are assessed on if they complete their mission, and then casualties that are assessed if there were combat units in the hex. Afterwards, you can lose your special forces units. So you want to be kind of careful on what targets you choose. Like I said, though, we'll get into a little bit more specifically on how helicopters are going to work in a later on video. This video, we're going to focus more on movement. So like I said, we're going to go slow with it. And since we are to the main phase of it, which is the Warsaw Pact land movement phase, and I do like how they have it annotated to the side, telling you what number it is in the rule book that you need to look up. And movement is not just cut and dry in this game. There's actually a lot that you have to understand when it comes to movement. All right, so one of the first things I want to show you guys is you have these counters, and let's flip this little screwball around. It'll say, if I can get that right, road mode on one side, and then it says hedgehog on the other side, okay? So when your units are just on the board like this, they're considered to be in tactical movement. So consider that normal movement. No real penalties or anything bad happening to them in combat. Hedgehog, I think of as kind of defensive. I might be wrong in the way that I think of that, but I think of it as defensive. You can't move when you're in hedgehog mode. So that's why it's not even listed down on the terrain effects chart on how much it costs, because if a unit's in hedgehog, they're not going anywhere. So basically your movement modes are either tactical or road mode. And obviously with road mode, that's going to be traveling farther in columns, you're mounted up, but you're not really prepared for combat. So you don't want to move a unit real fast and get up next to the enemy in road mode, because then you're going to be in for a world of hurt when they attack you and your guys aren't in the right position. So you might have the ones who are farther back use road to get in, get stuck in quicker, and then change them back over to tactical. But there's a cost associated with all that. All right, so we're going to eyeball, and let's come back around over here for better lighting. We're going to eyeball the terrain effects chart and the movement modifiers. And like I said, movement is not just cut and dry when it comes to this. Now, generally speaking, when you're conducting a ground attack, that's what's going to happen during your movement phase. So if you move into a enemy zone of control, that's where ground combat is going to come into it. So we're going to see that during this phase of the game. But you can see, looking here at the top, you've got road mode and tactical mode, and that's how many points it costs to move through all these different types of terrain, right? Now, the thing of it is each ground unit has 20 points to use. I think that's a good way to go with it, that they did that. So you're not having to worry about all the different units having, multiple different factors. It's one less factor that they have to worry about putting onto the counter itself. And it gave them the ability to have that, instead of like a movement point, have the embedded flak. So I like how they did that. So actually, if we flip and we're looking at a combat unit here, and this is in the booklet player aid, you see that it shows at the bottom attack value is on the left, flak rating is in the center, and then your defensive value is on the right. No movement listed because, of course, the movement is standard. But it's not just the 20. So it's not 20 and done. I've mentioned this previously, but there's a whole other slew of things that come into play. Now, these are a whole lot of movement cost charts on different things on all the different attacks, because it's not just standard attacks either. There are multiple different types of attacks that you can do. And you can see there at the top, it talks about the points cost to change modes. So it's not just free. And again, I like how they have the rules reference right here on the side. Very, very good with that, because there's no way everyone could keep this all in their head, especially the first couple times you're playing the game. You know, if you're playing a huge campaign game with like a couple of buddies, then after a while, I'm sure you're going to have all this, you know, pretty well memorized after all the units that you have to move. But especially when starting out, I'm sure you're going to be digging in the rule book a lot. But I like how they have it all listed down, all the different types. Obviously, when it's road mode, it's prohibited to do the assault. You can't really launch an attack from road mode. You can disengage. There is a type of combat which is disengagement combat, which is actually interesting. And then you see the cost over on the tactical mode on how much it's going to cost to do those different types of assaults. Now, when we start talking about ground combat, we'll probably just do a standard assault for the first few just to kind of walk through how that's going to go. But like I was saying, it's not just the 20. So you have all this up here to worry about. You've got the fact that you're either in multiple different types of modes, how many unit points it's going to cost or movement points it's going to cost to do the type of movement or type of assault, and then for all the different type of terrain. Then on top of that, that's where we get down into fatigue. And this is what I had mentioned previously, that you're not just limited to the 20. I think it goes up to 50. I'd have to check. I think 50 is the max. It's 40 or 50 that you can go up to. I want to say it's 50. But basically, you can move farther than the 20, but you run the chance of fatiguing your guys. And that's just, you're burning your equipment, your guys are tired, you know, it's representing all that type stuff. So if we're at fatigue level 0, right, we're moving and there's no fatigue on the unit, we're going to be looking at this set of columns right here. The moment you're moving and you hit your 20, and then, so that +1, basic movement points +1. So when we're at 21 and up, that's when we're going to have to roll here. If the unit has no fatigue, you're going to be rolling 0 to 10 or 1 to 10 rather. There's not going to be an effect. 11 to 20, you're going to increase the fatigue by 1. If you're already at fatigue 1 though, then it changes the results. If you're at fatigue 2, then it makes it to where your you can potentially incur step losses. And then down here, this has to do with the basic movement points plus 11. So it changes depending on how far you're going to push your guys. So 21 and up to 29, yeah, that would be what, 29 points? No, yeah, 20 points. I have to think about it. So up until 30, okay? So from 20 to 30, you're going to be looking at this column. When you hit 31, then you have to look at this set of rows, rather, not columns, but this set of modifiers. So you can push your guys even harder, but you see that if you're at no fatigue, then there's a much higher chance that your fatigue's going to go up. If you're already at fatigue 1, then it's automatically going to increase it. And if you're already at fatigue 2, then you're automatically going to take a step loss. And then from 21 points and up, so that would be, yeah, 41 points there. So yeah, it has to go up to 50. 41 points of movement. Then you're going to be basically automatically either increasing your fatigue or taking step losses. So movement can go more than double the amount of points that you have as your base movement, but you can potentially start incurring penalties to your units up to including losing steps for your units. And just to show you guys these very quickly, there are counters that show your fatigue level. Fatigue level 1, fatigue level 2, there on the back that you will start throwing onto these units. So there's a lot that you have to worry about. The counter density can get quite heavy, depending on the unit. If they have ammo to worry about, if the different types of modes that they're in, whether or not they're fatigued. So you can have multiple counters stacked on a single unit, designating what's going on with it, just depending on, its status, even if it's damaged. So there's a lot of different little moving parts to keep track of. That's what I was trying to get across to you guys. But let's take, I'm going to grab out a few of these mode counters just to have on hand, and let's move some units to kind of see an effect of how it's going to work. Okay, so we're over here at the Warsaw Pact side because they're the ones who are obviously moving right now. And you have to be aware of the fact that certain units don't move. All right, so like our fixed units would be units like this here, our surface to air missiles. These units are fixed and they're not going to move from whatever their little starting position is. So we don't have to worry about moving those. Now the rest, the mobile units, they're going to all move individually, with the exception, of course, because there are plenty of exceptions here, that support units can move if they're stacked with a combat unit. So I think a good example would be, is this one stacked with one? Yeah. Okay, so here's a good example. We have a combat unit here, a tank unit of the Soviets, and they are stacked with an air defense unit, and these guys are mobile, right? So the ADA ones, like this little arch, what I think of them as, these guys are mobile, the little SAM sites aren't. You can move these stacked together. They can also be like dropped off. So if you're moving your combat unit and they have multiple different types of support units stacked with them, you can drop them in different areas. They don't have to all stay together if they start moving together. So we're going to be looking at our little chart here, and I think we'll switch them over to road mode because they're pretty far back there from the combat, so we can get them up close, and we've still got other combat units in between those guys and where they're going to get. And plus, it'll save them a whole lot. So let's grab our counter here. We're going to put these guys into road mode. Throw this down right there on them. So looking down at it, and actually let me pull the chart back up so I can show you guys. You can see planes in road mode cost 1, but the Autobahn there cost 1/2 in road mode. Cost 1 in tactical, 1/2 in road mode. Now we've already spent 8 though. Just by switching them from tactical to road mode, we've spent 8 points. So we have 12 points left to spend of movement all around here up into 20, and then I don't want to send anyone to fatigue just yet. We'll do that a little bit later on. I'm trying to decide which way I'm going to send this guy because I kind of want to get him over into here. I want to have some other combat units before him, but these guys aren't going to really go on the attack. Actually, I could probably move them up anyway because I'm not really going to be attacking with the NATO forces. The NATO forces are a lot weaker than the Warsaw Pact forces. All right, so let's look. Let's count it out. We know this plane would be 1. If I got him on the road, that would be 1/2. So let's not worry about that 1 just yet because I'm going to see about the road movement. So 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. So we would be effectively at 7.5 right there. That's not too bad. I mean, we have 12 points left, so we could keep moving up this road if we wanted to, but I don't think I want to do that. And I need to check it because I might violate stacking limits with the ground units that are here. I believe you're allowed to just pass through. You can't stop. I know there are stacking limits as far as certain units and certain hexes, but I believe it's okay for passing through. I'm going to have to check that one again here in a minute. But let's move them up to here. So we're going to take road mode up to there. So in the way that we did that, we ended up spending a total of 7.5 movement points. It's not actually too bad with road mode because that Autobahn gave them a nice movement bonus. And We'll slide them there, and give me 1 sec. I'm gonna grab something to mark them with so I remember that I've moved them already. Okay, so we got them moved. I put one of my little yellow beads on it to designate it for me that these guys have moved. That's just the way I'm doing it. Some people turn them to the side or upside down. I've read the rule book multiple times just checking to make sure I wasn't missing it. As far as I know, there are no counters and any designated way to remember on which ones you've moved and which ones you haven't. So go with your own solution. I probably missed it. I'm sure it says it in there somewhere, but the rule book's rather large. So it's probably on me that I missed it. But regardless, either way, marking it with a bead, one of your own markers, turning it to the side, whatever way works for you to remember that you already have moved these units. Make sure, though, that you do leave the counter on there designating what type of movement mode they are in if they have changed, because that is going to matter. It's not going to matter for these guys because there's sure as hell no way NATO's going to blast through the heavy forces they have right here to get at them. That's why I parked them just a little bit farther back, but just so we do keep track of it. Now, something that you have to keep in mind when it comes to this game specifically, when you're doing movement, is when you move a combat unit, it opens up the possibilities of a lot of different things happening. Now, I can't remember all the specific ones off the top of my head, but I know it opens up especially a whole lot of air possibilities when you do move a combat unit, that you can try to do certain strikes, and then there can be interceptions. That's why I was saying that the other side can't be absent. So it can't be just Warsaw Pact doing their whole thing, then the NATO player comes back and does their whole thing, because they have the option to do certain things, and then the NATO player does have the option as well after a combat unit is moved. And in the rulebook, it does state about a combat unit specifically, and it was explained in the rulebook, so it's not tried to be gamed. As in, if you have a stack of air defense units, say, I think was the example in the rulebook, that you're slowly moving over, you're moving all the units, and then they wait until the air defense units are out of the way, and then come in and try to hit them with an air attack against whatever force is left behind, trying to kind of catch them with their pants down. That's why most of those air attacks can only be conducted after a combat unit is moved, and not after a support unit like our ADA units or engineering units or rail forces that the Warsaw Pact has for their extra supplies. Any of those type of units, they don't count for activating the possibility for air assets to be exchanged back and forth. All right, so I've already gotten a little long-winded, and like I said, I know I'm taking a long time with this, and I apologize, but I'm really trying to take it slow so I do right by this game. And what I'm trying to do with each one of them, like I said again, is to kind of touch on a specific aspect. So I think I've shown movement and how it's going to work, the basic gist of it. Actually, can I move a unit rather quickly to show you guys fatigue, just to show how that would work? Maybe I'll move a air defense unit from way back and fatigue them. Now, this one is stationary, so this one's way back here, but he's covering an airport, and I don't necessarily want to pull that off. Let's see. Maybe I can move this guy badly and just... Well, this major river actually costs a lot, and if I move him over a river, that will take a lot. All right, so I'm going to move one of these support units badly just to show you guys fatigue. Instead of moving him along the road, I'm going to try to move him across the river and other stuff so we can show how fatigue roll is going to work real quick. All right, so we're not going to change his mode. And looking at it, you see most of the costs are definitely higher when we're looking at tactical. And I'm going to move him through some rough. Let's see, a couple of different types of rough. City takes a little more. Big thing is going to be the major river hex side without a bridge. And you guys can see that's +8 on the movement point cost. Minor rivers, the light blue versus dark blue, is +4 in tactical mode. Doesn't cost you any extra if they are bridged. So I'm going to pop him across that just to get him fatigued rather quickly. So if we go up here, that's a plain road. We'll call that 2. And that's 10. to there, because 8 for crossing the unbridged. Again, I could go right across here, and I would normally, but I'm just trying to fatigue him on purpose. So if I go, 2, 10, 10, 12. I don't want to move him along the road. Let's go up. So it's 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Well, can't because I'll be crossing the river. I don't want to tuck him behind the river. I see him 10 here. We're going to have to cross the road. All right, so 10, and that's 12. Still, tactical mode's still 2 anyway, so it doesn't matter. 14, I believe that's 4. Yep, this one's 4, so that's 18, 20 to here, and then 22. All right, so I moved very badly, very badly. Don't do like I'm doing, but I moved very badly to get myself to 22 movement points to get dummy over to here. All right, so we will mark him just so I remember that I have moved him. And again, none of the air asset stuff can be done because this is a support unit. It's not a combat unit. So now we have to roll on the chart to see if he becomes fatigued because he did over 20 movement points worth of movement. So let's look at our chart again real quick here. And we can see by looking at it that he's on the top because he's only gone over by just a few points. He's gone over by 2, but under 11. So he's going to be rolling here, and he's going to be rolling on this top column because he has no fatigue at this point. So we're looking at 1 through 10, so he doesn't increase, but an 11 through 12 will, or 11 through 20 rather, will get him an increase in his fatigue. So rolling, and he got a 15, so he does increase. So we take our fatigue 1 marker and we'll place it just like so. And this is going to come into play in a lot of different things, mainly in combat. If your units are fatigued, the fatigue aspect, the fatigue modifier is negative for them. So you don't want them to be fatigued when it comes to combat. All right, so like I said, I'm going to try to cover a little different aspect of each part of the game with each video, just doing this slowly. I'm going to move some more units off camera in between this video and the next. And my goal for the next video is to get a combat unit into a zone of control over here. If I can, I think I should be able to spend enough points, maybe get up here, attack some of these German units maybe with these guys. That way I can get at least a ground combat going on. Show you guys how that works. Then cover some air helicopters, air assets, how they move coming in, conducting their attacks, how it has to work as far as air superiority. Remember, because we did cover that in our previous video. So mega hexes right here, any of these Soviet helicopters that were flying through these 2 mega hexes, which they're going to have to, they are going to have to deal with a air superiority aspect of the NATO having that here. And if NATO were to fly in, it would behoove them to fly in up and around to avoid the air superiority that the Soviets have over here. So neat part to worry about. So we're going to cover that. We're going to cover combat in the next one. We'll cover helicopters after. Then we need to cover probably combat with ground strikes, because that's when you can do combat, send in jets to help them out, and then your opponent can send in interception, so you can send your escorts with your jets. So it's a lot of like back and forth on how that's going to go. That's why I'm trying to break it down into little pieces. So we show just the combat, then we show combat with adding in the ground strike aspect of it, and then we'll show combat with helicopters, and then how air defense forces work and how their ranges normally work. Because remember, this was different when we were doing air superiority than how it's going to work when we actually do fly units in, because they do have a range. Like this one, its range is 2 hexes, right? So it just depends. This one, its range is 3 hexes. Not quite as good though. So like I said, put your questions down below if you want me to cover a different specific aspect. If there's something that you're curious about, please, not the optional stuff, because I'm trying to not have this be a 50-part series. which this game would quickly turn into if I was trying to cover every single little thing about it, just because there's so many little nuances. They're just so neat in how everything interacts back and forth on this game. And like I said, the designer does watch the videos, so putting your comments down below, he will see them as well as myself, so he will be able to help out too. And I do appreciate you commenting on it, Fabrizio. You're awesome, man. You're the man. So yeah, we're going to pause here. We've covered movement pretty well. We'll get it into ground combat on the next one, zones of control, how all that's going to work. Anyway, you guys take care. I will see you in the next one.